A warm hello to you all. I don't know if I was just a foolish woman or simply too naive for my own good. Perhaps you'll understand me better once you've heard the story I'm about to share. I got married when I was just 16, a marriage that didn't begin with love. I agreed to marry him simply because I felt sorry for him. I met him at a photo studio. That day, I came to pick up some wedding photos from the wedding of the man I had loved. My first love, a man I loved in silence and could never truly hide my feelings for. In the end, he married someone else because his family never accepted me. At that time, I was too young to fully understand the feeling of loss or heartbreak. But he was older than me. He knew the guilt of marrying one woman while leaving another behind. I didn't blame anyone. I didn't feel hatred or anger. I simply went to have my pictures taken at the wedding of the man I loved, and then, on this day, came back to collect them. And it was on that very day that I met the man I would later call my husband. He saw me walking out of the photo shop alone. He and a friend whispered something to each other, then came up to start a conversation. I responded casually, not paying much attention. He asked if I lived nearby, and I answered honestly. Coincidentally, he happened to have an acquaintance who lived near my house. From that day forward, he started visiting from time to time. To be honest, he wasn't the kind of man I liked. Around him, I didn't feel anything. No flutter of love, no spark. But day after day, he kept coming back, trying to talk to me. Eventually, I spoke to him first. Maybe that gave him the hope he needed to get closer, to start using every trick, even pity, to win me over. He told me he'd gotten into an accident while trying to see me and cried when I turned him down. And so I agreed to marry him, not out of love, but out of sympathy. I pitied the way he seemed to suffer because of me. I pitied a man who came from afar just to win my heart. On the day I became his wife, I slowly began to realize he wasn't the deep, sensitive man I had imagined. He wasn't gentle, wasn't thoughtful. In truth, he was just prideful and vain. One time, half joking, he told me the first time he came up to speak to me was because of a dare from the friend he was with. That friend had said, "I bet you can't get that girl to fall for you." And so, he turned a silly bet into something real. Now, I was his wife, the trophy of a meaningless wager. His family was poor, but I didn't mind hardship. I wanted to live like the women I admired, strong, devoted wives who built a warm home with their own hands. I worked relentlessly, in the fields, in the house, without complaint. But he rarely helped me. Every time we worked together, it always ended in arguments. In the end, I worked alone in the fields, not caring where he went or what he did. One day, he suddenly told me he wanted to take me out. I was surprised, but happy. He drove me to a strange house, the home of a woman who had 2 daughters. One was his age, the other was younger. He told me, "You stay here and chat with her mom, okay? I'm going out with the girl for a bit." I didn't ask anything. Where they went, I didn't care. I just stayed behind and had lunch with the girl's mother. She was even kind enough to cut my hair, saying it would make me look prettier. He was gone with her until late in the evening. I didn't get angry, didn't question him. I wasn't even curious about the nature of their relationship. The next day, while I was bent over working in the fields, he appeared again, this time with that same girl. We exchanged polite greetings and smiled softly at each other. Then, right in front of both of us, he casually said, "This is my wife, and this is my girlfriend." And just like that, he turned and walked away with her, leaving me standing alone in the vast field. No explanation, no second glance. Strangely, I didn't feel sad. I wasn't angry. My heart didn't ache. I didn't shed a tear. My emotions had been worn down to the point where there was nothing left to break. And I wondered, was I some kind of Buddha? A symbol of silent endurance, so invisible that I no longer existed? In the early days of living with his family, my mother-in-law and his siblings treated me with genuine kindness. They loved me like their own daughter, and I truly appreciated that. But my husband was the complete opposite. He began to show his true nature, rough, short-tempered, and violent. At first, it was just harsh words. Then came the slaps. Eventually, he even kicked me. The only thought running through my mind was, do whatever you want, but if you become an abuser, I will not and can never accept it. I overheard people whispering that he might have inherited it from his father. Back in the day, his dad used to tie his mom's hair to the bedpost before beating her. That detail snapped me awake. I saw a dark future unfolding before me if I stayed, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly smart, astonishingly clear-headed. I realized if someone has hurt you once, they will do it again, and it'll get worse. People like that never change. From that moment on, I quietly began planning to leave him for good. But it wasn't easy. My home was far away. I couldn't just walk back. I had no other choice but to endure in silence. I didn't fight back. I didn't resist. I played the role of a docile, obedient wife just so he wouldn't suspect a thing. Then one day, I said, I'd like to go visit my parents. Without hesitation, he agreed and even helped arrange the timing. I knew this was my only chance. I prepared everything carefully and silently. I didn't dare bring much with me, fearing he'd get suspicious. I only packed a few dresses I had sewn myself before the marriage and my most important documents. All I needed was to leave that house, and once I did, I swore I'd never return. The day I returned home, my parents' house was still as peaceful as it had been throughout my childhood. The old wooden gate, the worn steps bearing the traces of time, and the faint scent of kitchen smoke drifting through the air stirred a mix of warmth and heartache in me. I walked in like a daughter who had been away for too long, but this time I returned with a hidden wound no one could see with the naked eye. My mother was surprised to see me come back empty-handed. No gifts, no luggage, just a small bag in my hand, as if it carried the entire life I had just abandoned. I didn't say much. I simply told her I came home to visit for a few days. But she looked deep into my eyes, then silently held my hand, a hand calloused from working the fields, swollen from silent beatings. She didn't ask anything. She just cooked me the simplest, warmest meal. My father, a quiet man with deep emotions, simply placed an extra chair at the table, as if to say, "Your place is still here, no matter how you return." That night, I lay on my old bed, listening to the chirping of crickets beneath the walls and the wind slipping through the roof tiles. I knew life ahead wouldn't be easy, but I also knew I had made the right choice. I didn't go back. I didn't call. I didn't say goodbye. I left a husband behind, but saved myself. A silent escape. After 3 days wrapped in the love of my parents and under the roof of my childhood home, I thought everything was finally behind me. I smiled again. I ate better. I slept deeper, as if the wounds inside had begun to heal. But then, he showed up. He entered our yard like a sudden storm breaking a clear sky. Gone were the sweet words and gentle smiles from our early days. In front of my parents, he revealed his true self, violent, crude, and arrogant. He growled, "Pack your things. You're coming back. I don't care if you're at your parents' house. I'll teach you a lesson right here. You think you can just leave? I spent so much on our wedding. If you want to go, pay it all back. The dowry, the gifts. You're my wife. Whether I love you or not, you still belong in my house. Don't even dream of escaping." But I wasn't afraid. On the contrary, a fire ignited inside me, a fierce determination like never before. His insults only fueled my resolve. I must leave this man. There is no turning back. I knew that reacting emotionally would only make things worse. My family would be shamed, neighbors would gossip, and if he lost control and hit me right there, the pain wouldn't just be physical, but also an attack on my dignity. So I swallowed every bit of anger and calmly acted as if I was trying to make peace. That evening, I ate dinner with him and my parents as if nothing had happened. I smiled, spoke gently, playing the role of the obedient wife. He believed me. Feeling reassured, he said, "We'll head back early tomorrow. If you stay here too long, people will talk." I nodded. All right. But deep inside, I knew by tomorrow morning, I would be gone. While he was still fast asleep, I quietly got up in the early dawn, the world outside still veiled in mist. Clutching the small bag that held a few sets of clothes and my important documents, I stepped out of my beloved childhood home, not to return to the life I once knew, but to disappear from his world forever. I left no note. I didn't look back. All I knew was that every step I took that morning was a step toward freedom, toward the days where I would live for myself, no longer someone's possession. Escaping the cage only to fall into a deeper pit. In the first few days after leaving him, I felt like I had broken free from a steel cage, or more accurately, a tiger's den. I thought I had found freedom, but reality was far more brutal. A new tragedy had silently begun. Alone in a strange city, I had no family, no money, no job, and not even a single diploma to my name. The only thing I had left was my youth, but that youth was too fragile, too inexperienced. In my loneliness, I fell into the hands of another man. This time, not one who used fists, but one who wore a mask of kindness. He told me he would help me find a job in the city, said I could stay at his place for a few days until I got back on my feet. To be honest, I was too drained to question or distrust anyone at that point. Compared to what I had just escaped from, every kind word sounded like truth. All I knew was that I was no longer beside a husband who had grown cruel and sick in the head. Even if the future ahead was a fog of uncertainty, at least now I wasn't living in daily terror. Sometimes I called home just to hear my mother's voice. She still loved me deeply. She said he was going crazy not knowing where I was. Some days he didn't eat, wandering the streets until he collapsed in public. But this time, I didn't believe it. I had seen those acts before. That was how he won me over years ago, playing the pitiful victim to break down my sympathy. I was no longer the naive girl who could be swayed by fake tears. I stayed silent, unmoved. Until one day, I called again, only to hear my mother's voice trembling. He said, if he ever finds you, he'll tear you to pieces. In that moment, fear left me. In its place rose a terrifying clarity, a cold, resolute determination. I knew, if I hesitated any longer, I wouldn't just lose my life, I would lose everything I am. The abandoned house amidst a glorious city. So there I was, in the city. The new man, the one who had promised to help me find a job and give me a place to stay, took me to a run-down, damp, and cramped abandoned house tucked away behind the bustling, noisy streets. That house had likely been untouched for years. No voices, no light, not even hope. What I felt at that moment wasn't sadness, or maybe I no longer knew what sadness was. I had grown too used to being left behind, too familiar with being trapped in situations I couldn't understand, couldn't control. My past was a long tunnel of darkness. The future, I wasn't even sure it was still coming. I didn't know if I was truly safe in that abandoned house, or if I was merely like prey being stored until the time came to be consumed. Days passed within those 4 decrepit walls. I didn't dare step outside. I don't remember if he ever locked the door. Maybe he didn't, but that didn't matter because the fear inside me had already locked it from within. Now and then, he would drop by. He'd hand me a few pieces of bread, like tossing scraps to someone who was merely existing. Then he'd leave. And I continued to live like a ghost, haunting an abandoned house in the middle of a city lit with dazzling lights. Filthy hands beneath a seemingly safe roof. Then one day, he told me he'd found a job for me. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this time life could begin anew, even if late, even if painfully slow. The job was to work as a maid for a wealthy family in the city. There were only the husband, the wife, and a small child. The wife seemed kind and diligent, off to the market early and only returning in the evening. The husband worked regularly as well, usually home only at night. I spent my days caring for the child, cooking, and cleaning the house. At first, everything seemed peaceful. Until one day, I caught a strange look in the husband's eyes. It wasn't the gaze of a man toward a housemaid. It was more like someone measuring, calculating, a mixture of mockery and hunting. I glanced at his wife. She truly was a good person, trusting me, not the slightest bit suspicious. Some evenings, we all ate dinner together, and she laughed and chatted warmly, unaware of the cold, grim shadow that lingered between us. I began to feel it clearly. Something was going to happen. And it happened quicker than I expected. One day, when only he and I were home, he suddenly grabbed my arm. The look in his eyes no longer hid its shameless intent. I struggled and pulled away. I looked him dead in the eye and said, with a clarity and strength I'd never mustered before, "I am not someone you can treat however you want." I ran into my room, heart pounding, but this time I didn't cry. I only felt cold and utterly disillusioned with the so-called new life I had once hoped for. After that day, he never touched me again, but I could feel it. His gaze no longer hunted me, it hated me. On a clear morning. It was a clear, sunny morning. My 3-story house in the township welcomed the first golden rays of light. In front of it, a busy road bustled with people and vehicles coming and going. I stood on the 3rd floor at a wide window that opened onto a scene like a real-life ink painting. A crystal-clear lake, gentle hills in the distance, and green rice fields stretching far into the horizon. From above, I saw a strange man sitting across the street. He wore tattered clothes. His hair was wild and unkempt. Beside him were old bottles and scraps of cloth. In his hand was a small notebook, and his face was dazed, as if lost in a trance. For a brief moment, he reminded me of a mad poet from some story I once read. The next day, I saw him walk past my house again. Then gradually, he began lingering around my home. And one day, without warning, he rushed inside. I stayed calm and asked, "What do you want?" Though he looked like a lunatic on the outside, I could sense from his eyes and demeanor that he wasn't truly insane. I asked bluntly, "You're not mad, are you? Then what is it that you want from me?" He didn't answer. After a few such encounters, when he saw I didn't react with panic or anger, just spoke to him calmly, he stopped coming. And then I started to think, to piece it together. Could it have been my former husband? The man I hadn't seen in over a decade? The one who had tricked and manipulated me into marriage when I was just 16? Back then, I was a naive girl, watching him brazenly flirt with other women right in front of me, even introducing me as his wife while calling the woman beside him his lover. But the woman I am now is no longer that girl. I no longer fall for pleading eyes or tearful voices. I've walked through a darkness filled with pain and tears, and somehow I made it home, to the family that is my truest peace. As for him, he's just a passerby now, a remnant of my past, like a fleeting scene I once glimpsed along the journey of life, now fading into the distance. Maybe he came to see if I was still the same girl I used to be, but no, I am not. I live with kindness. But it was he who taught me that kindness without understanding is a recipe for disaster. Now, in this house of my own, looking out at the wide open world, I no longer fear. I know I have walked through the shadows. But my story, perhaps, is not quite over yet. After traveling a long and winding road in life, I have realized that the choices we make early on are incredibly important. If I had married later, when I was mature enough to understand what I needed and recognize who was truly worthy, perhaps I would not have had to walk such a long and painful detour. In the end, I found peace. But deep inside my heart, there still remains a silent emptiness. I still live alone, and the wounds left by the men who passed through my life still ache quietly, like a sudden cold wind that twists my heart whenever the weather changes. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. It's not a perfect journey, nor an easy one, but it is real, just like life itself. I hope somewhere between these words you find something familiar, an old memory, a new perspective, or simply the faith that no matter how many storms come, as long as you keep moving forward, tomorrow is always worth waiting for. If you find meaning in this story, please leave a comment to share your thoughts, and don't forget to give me a like and subscribe. That will be the motivation for me to continue writing new stories for those who have fallen but still stand up. See you in the next stories. Warm regards.